the first threads of a nightmare. America was burning. It didn't happen with nuclear fire or an invasion force. No fleets of warships descending from the sky. No doomsday weapons wiping out cities. No, this was something far more insidious. The destruction came from within. Fentanyl, a synthetic opioid, a powder so potent that a single microgram could kill a man. It spread through the streets like a plague, consuming lives at a terrifying pace. Every week, thousands died, silent casualties in a war they never even knew they were fighting. The news blamed the cartels, the politicians blamed China, the people blamed their own government. But the truth, the real truth, was something no one dared to consider. It wasn't human. FBI Special Agent Ethan Carter had seen it all. Drug busts, cartel executions, black market operations, but nothing prepared him for the horror he uncovered in the back alleys of Los Angeles. It started with a routine raid, a lead pointing to a shipment of ultra-pure fentanyl flowing into the city. But what they found wasn't just drugs. It was something else entirely. The warehouse reeked of death. Stacks of bodies, dealers, addicts, even cops, lay lifeless, their faces frozen in expressions of pure terror. Not from an overdose, no foam at the mouth, no needles in their arms, their eyes. All of them were wide open, pupils dilated like they had seen something beyond human comprehension. Ethan's hand tightened around his gun as he moved deeper inside. His partner, Detective Alvarez, whispered under his breath, "This isn't a normal overdose scene, man. This is wrong." And then they found it, a canister, black, metallic, covered in symbols that no one could decipher. The cartel enforcers who had been guarding the shipment were dead too, their bodies twisted, spines arched backward in impossible angles. Ethan stepped closer. The air around the canister felt wrong, like the space itself was bending, warping, whispering. A single line of text was engraved into its surface. "Not of this world." Ethan's stomach turned. He didn't know it yet, but he had just stumbled upon the beginning of something far worse than a drug epidemic. This was an invasion. The first signs of an impossible truth. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to leave the canister alone. But the world didn't give him that choice. Within hours, the warehouse was locked down. The DEA, the CIA, and even the Pentagon got involved. The canister was gone, vanished into a classified black site before Ethan could get any answers. But that wasn't what disturbed him the most. It was the autopsy report. The coroner called him at 3 a.m., voice shaking. "You need to see this for yourself." At the morgue, Ethan stood over one of the cartel enforcers who had been guarding the shipment. His chest was cut open, but there was no blood. His organs were missing. Instead, there was something else inside. A black crystalline substance was fused into his spinal column, spreading through his nervous system like roots of an alien tree. "This man," the coroner whispered, "wasn't killed by an overdose. Something grew inside him." Ethan's mind reeled. This wasn't just fentanyl, it was something more, something alive. He ran a trembling hand over his face. "Where the hell did this stuff come from?" The coroner hesitated, then she showed him the scan. At first, it looked like a molecular breakdown of fentanyl, but there was anomalous data, compounds that shouldn't exist, because they didn't. "These structures," the coroner whispered, "don't follow the laws of Earth's chemistry." Ethan felt the weight of the world crash onto his shoulders. Fentanyl wasn't just a drug, it was a bioweapon, and it wasn't from Earth. The hunters in the dark. Ethan's mind raced as he left the morgue. This was no longer a drug case. This was something far worse. If fentanyl wasn't just an opioid, if it was something engineered, something alien, then who the hell was behind it, and why? His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated before answering. "Carter." A voice, distorted and mechanical, whispered through the speaker. "You need to stop." Ethan's blood ran cold. "Who is this?" "You're getting too close." Click. The call disconnected. Ethan stared at his phone. his pulse hammering. Someone was watching him, someone who didn't want this truth getting out. He wasn't just investigating a drug conspiracy anymore. He was being hunted. They came for him that night. The first thing he noticed was the silence. Los Angeles never slept. Even at 3 a.m., sirens wailed, distant cars rumbled, and helicopters hummed in the sky. But tonight, nothing. No sound, no wind, just an unnatural stillness. And then, the shadows moved. Ethan barely had time to react before the first shot came. His bedroom window exploded, glass shards flying as a red laser beam burned straight through his mattress. He rolled off the bed, grabbed his Glock, and crawled toward the closet. His breath came fast, muscles coiled like a spring. The shadows shifted again. No footsteps, no breathing, just a presence. He caught a glimpse of it. A tall, gaunt figure, its skin a metallic black, its eyes voids of shimmering darkness. Not human. Ethan fired. The bullets hit, but didn't slow it down. It blinked and his gun jammed. His body suddenly felt heavy, his limbs like lead. It was inside his mind. A whisper slithered into his skull. "You weren't supposed to know." His vision blurred. A high-pitched frequency ripped through his head like a knife. And then, everything went black, escape from the unseen pain. That was the first thing Ethan felt when he woke up. The second was cold metal around his wrists. He was tied to a chair. A single, flickering light bulb illuminated the room. Concrete walls, no windows. Interrogation. But not by the FBI. A figure sat across from him, shrouded in darkness. Ethan squinted, but he couldn't focus on their face, like his brain refused to process it. "Tell me what you know," the figure rasped. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Why don't you tell me where the hell I am first?" A long pause. Then the figure leaned forward, revealing a twist of features that weren't entirely human. Their eyes were black voids, swirling like distant galaxies. "You've seen too much." Ethan gritted his teeth. "Then kill me," the figure smiled. "Number, you're more useful alive." Before he could react, something sharp pierced his neck. His vision dimmed, his heartbeat slowed. The last thing he heard was a whisper. "Welcome to the real war. The real war begins." Ethan woke up to the sound of a heartbeat monitor. His entire body felt like it had been ripped apart and stitched back together with barbed wire. His surroundings were wrong. He was in a hospital bed, but the walls were too smooth, the air too sterile. Not a hospital, a facility. And then he saw it, beyond the reinforced glass window. The Earth, floating in space. His breath hitched. He wasn't on Earth anymore. A door hissed open. A man in a dark suit stepped in. But Ethan knew immediately, this wasn't a man. There was something off. His skin too perfect. His movements too precise. Not human. The man smiled. "You survived." Ethan's fingers twitched, searching for a weapon. "Where the hell am I?" The Not Man sat beside him. "On the edge of your extinction." Ethan's pulse slammed in his ears. "Fentanyl isn't just a drug." The Not Man's voice was smooth, calculated. "It's a preparation tool." Ethan's stomach twisted. "You mean a weapon?" The thing nodded. "We don't invade planets with guns, Ethan. We invade them by making them weak enough to fall on their own." The room seemed to close in. Fentanyl wasn't just a crisis. It was a culling, a controlled collapse before the final stage. Ethan's blood turned to ice. "How long until the invasion begins?" The thing smiled again. "It already has. The world is already lost." Ethan felt like he was drowning. Every moment, every clue, every death, all leading here. The overdoses, the synthetic supply chains, the impossible chemical structures. The cartel wasn't running this. The government wasn't running this. Something else was. Something not human. Ethan lunged forward, wrapping his hands around the thing's throat. It didn't resist. It just watched him. "Do you think this matters?" the Not Man whispered. Ethan tightened his grip, and then He saw it. A flicker. For a second, the thing's skin peeled away like static. What was beneath wasn't bone or muscle. It was something shifting, something that shouldn't exist. Ethan recoiled, breathing hard. The thing straightened its tie. "We don't need your permission to take your world, Ethan. It's already ours?" And then the alarms blared, emergency sirens. A breach, boom. The wall behind them exploded. A figure stormed in, holding a pulse rifle. "Come with me if you want to live," she said. Ethan didn't hesitate. The last resistance. Ethan ran, his mind still reeling. Who the hell was she? They sprinted through dimly lit corridors, the sound of something inhuman giving chase. His rescuer turned and fired. The walls shimmered, then shattered, revealing a dark, endless void. Ethan stopped breathing. They weren't in a ship. They were in a structure built between dimensions. "We don't have time for questions," she snapped. "We have 5 minutes before they seal the exits." Ethan forced himself to move. Another explosion rocked the facility. His rescuer dragged him through a sliding panel into what looked like an escape pod. She shoved him inside. Ethan barely strapped himself in before the pod detached and plummeted toward Earth, toward the war that had already begun. Earth is not the same anymore. The pod slammed through the atmosphere, heat shields burning red hot. Ethan braced himself as the impact rattled his bones. Then, silence. He unbuckled and kicked the hatch open, and froze. The city he knew, Washington, D.C., was gone. Not destroyed. Worse, changed. The skyline was the same, but the streets, empty. No sirens, no honking, just an eerie, unnatural silence. He stepped forward, heart hammering. Then he saw them. People. But not people anymore. Their eyes empty. Their movements slow, robotic, controlled. His breath hitched. It was too late. The invasion hadn't started. It had already won. The truth is worse than death. Footsteps echoed behind him. He spun, rifle raised. His rescuer stood there, gun lowered. She removed her helmet, revealing piercing green eyes and short dark hair. "They're not dead," she said, voice tight. Ethan swallowed. "Then what the hell is wrong with them?" She exhaled. "Fentanyl, the final phase. It didn't just kill them, Ethan." She pointed to the closest vacant-eyed pedestrian. "It turned them into receivers." His stomach dropped. "You mean they're still alive?" She nodded grimly. "But their minds aren't theirs anymore." A cold chill wrapped around his spine. "Who are you?" Ethan asked. She gave him a dark smile. "The only one left who can fight back." Then she tossed him a tablet. The screen flickered, showing a map. Pulsing red dots, spreading like cancer. The entire country had already fallen. "Welcome," she said, locking her rifle, "to the last days of humanity. This is only the beginning." Ethan barely processed what he was seeing. The entire world infected. Not with a disease, with control. He clenched his fists. "No." His rescuer raised an eyebrow. "No?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "If they wanted to kill us, they would have done it already." She studied him. "So?" Ethan's grip on his rifle tightened. "That means there's still a chance to fight back." She laughed, not mocking, genuine. "You're insane." Ethan turned toward the glowing, pulsing skyline of a planet no longer under human rule. "Then let's give them a war they'll never forget."